Ohana Book Two Birds of a Feather Chapter 7. Green Hills had quieted down since the last of the military vans had left the area. Gunn had delivered on their promise to get the small town back on their feet, even if the sheriff and his partner did most of the organizing of the reconstruction. The townspeople had gone back to their daily lives, even if a few things did seem a bit out of the ordinary to them. Much of the forest was gone because of the battle, a sizable gap in the trees indicating where a Ghent robot had caused havoc just weeks before. Gun unit had transplanted trees and woodlife from another area, but there was no erasing the destruction. Raised earth along trails where it used to be easily accessible, or a waterfall where it shouldn't be, where they were waiting for trees. There was a hologram, and if Tom was truthful, it felt very Hunger Games-y. He had been enjoying one of his first days off since the trip to Hawaii when a loud boom echoed through the house and he simply rolled onto his back and placed an arm over his eyes, thinking.
What now?
Maddie's side of the bed was empty, his wife having left for work early, so he couldn't stir her and suggest she go out and deal with the boys. He heard Knuckles yelling, a sound that was becoming far too normal, and sighed, rolling over once again to slip his slippers on and get out of bed, shrugging his dressing gown over his shoulders. The fire alarm started beeping before it shorted out, and Tom rubbed at his ears as he reached the kitchen, leaning against the doorframe and looking at the scene that presented itself before extinguisher foam sprayed in his face. Sonic lowered the hose and looked at him both sheepishly and guiltily, hunching his shoulders, and Knuckles looked over at them from where he had been attempting to put out the small fire that had just started in the toaster. Tails was nowhere to be seen.
Seriously, guys, another one.
He grunted, whipping his face with the towel Sonic had sipped into the bathroom to grab him.
Yes, Lord of Donuts.
Knuckles confirmed, shaking the toaster out into the sink and producing glowing waffles.
We had simply been attempting to make you breakfast on this day, West, and we had not known that the fox had tampered with the machine.
English.
Tom looked at his blue son, who waved his hand as Knuckles looked into the toaster and was greeted with a puff of smoke. It was too early for Echidna jargon.
Tails must have tinkered with the toaster.
Sonic quickly doused the Echidna with water from the tap, though his fur remained slightly singed from the residual flame.
Luckily it's not sentient like a Roomba.
Just a beast of fire.
Knuckles added with a skull, finally setting the toaster down on the sink and picking the glowing waffles up with his gloves, holding them at arm's length. Sonic fetched him a garbage bag, then disappeared for another unknown location.
A fierce dragon, as my father once told me about.
Not a dragon, buddy.
Tom said, looking at the disappointment on the teenager's face and reaching out to pat him on the head as he came over, where once he would have flinched from the contact. Knuckles now simply grumbled and wiped his hand across his wet fur, gloves coming away with soot.
Well, as sweet as it was of you guys to try to make a breakfast, how I make my famous pancakes.
Sonic returned at the sound of pancakes, looking as though he had just run a country mile and shook the leaves out of his grills.
But it's not Sunday.
We can't have radioactive waffles for breakfast.
Tom made a mental note to talk to Tails later, reaching into the cupboard for the pancake mix and then another for the frying pan.
Take a seat now, breakfast ready now, Tom.
The sound of his phone ringing rang from the bedroom and he sighed, rubbing his face and holding his hand out for it as he felt a swift wind drive by. Wait, great. Now what? Deciding to answer, Tom set the frying pan down on the bench and held it up to his ear.
Go for Tom.
Hey, man, I know it's your day off, but I need you to come down to the corner of Willow and Evergreen. Philka Thimmer had an accident and I think you're gonna want to see this. Your kids too.
Tom looked over his shoulder to see Sonic and Knuckles now arguing on the amount of space between them and needed the bridge of his nose again.
I'll pack him up and be there shortly, Thor.
Minor concussion and leg bruising, but other than that, he's fine. He's already at the county hospital.
Great, thanks. Wait.
Tom sighed and hung up, then placed the frying pan and pancake mix back into the cupboards where they came from, instead getting out a few boxes.
Bad news, guys. We're switching to plants so you pick your Pop-Tart and Funtails because we gotta have.
That stopped both of his boys short, and Knuckles straightened himself like he had been willing to tackle his younger brother off the seat he sat on.
Can he not handle himself for one day?
The Echidna asked, seriously doubting himself even as he said it. Their interactions with Wade were frequent, considering he was Tom's work partner, and Knuckles was less than impressed sometimes.
Nobody ever can, it seems.
Tom responded, pressing a finger to his mouth as he went to go get dressed, a signal that they shouldn't leave the house. Knuckles' brow furrowed and he nodded as Sonic reached over for the brown sugar Pop-Tarts, and they disappeared from his view as he rounded the corner back to the bedroom. Ozzy whined at him from the bed where he was now sprawled out basking in the warmth, and he patted the golden retriever's head as he began getting dressed. By the time he returned to the kitchen, Sonic and Knuckles had found Tails. More Sonic, he figured, and the fox rubbed his arm.
Sorry about the toaster. Mr. Wachowski gonna put everything back in working order, but...
Tom waved a hand, leaning down so he could talk to the kit.
It's fine. And what did I tell you about that Mr. Bohop stuff? You're you know? Tom.
Or Dad went unsaid, but he wasn't sure how Tails would feel about that.
Besides, I'm more concerned with her might you herself pulling all that metal apart.
Tails blinked as though he hadn't expected that, scratching his cheek with a finger sheepishly.
Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm not in trouble.
You'll have to put post-it notes on things you feel with so we can keep an eye out, but we don't mind. It's healthy you have a hobby.
That said, he pointedly looked at Sonic.
Unlike some people.
Hey, jogging is a hobby.
Not at the speeds you go.
Tom looked at Tails again, taking note of the way his namesakes curled around and between his legs like a dog that had been told no, meeting bright blue eyes that were so intelligent but unsure. He reached and ruffled the little colic on the kit's forehead.
I'll pick you up and do it yourself. Get from the hardware store after if you want something to do.
His eyes brightened further before Tails flinched a little.
But you don't have tail.
You're my cat, aren't you? Of course I want to.
He chose the words "my kid" on purpose, just to see what would happen. For a moment, confusion wiped across Tails' face before Sonic nudged him with his elbow to break him out of the trance the word had him under.
But first we have to go see Wade, so choose your Pop-Tart of destiny.
Tom stood back up and watched the little guy look between him, Sonic, and Knuckles and then the counter and hop onto one of the bar stools the older Mobians had been arguing over earlier, reaching for the chocolate fudge with an eager expression. His kids had been through so much, whoever had hurt Tails should be grateful he didn't have a ring to get to them. Tom pulled up the van onto a curve in the road, spying Wade taking notes in his logbook and examining the damage. Sonic whistled lowly as they got out, rubbing the Pop-Tart from the corner of his mouth as he followed behind Knuckles from the backseat and over to the car. Well, what was left of the car. There was a large, hollow dent in the hood, the engine still smoking from the damage, and the back was like a crushed cartoon crate.
Looks like Phil was lucky.
The sheriff said, walking around the vehicle first before he went over to his deputy. Leaning over his shoulder to look at the notes and finding nothing but doodles, Tom gave Wade a light smack up the back of the head, watching his boys cautiously examine the damage.
Anything to report?
Nobody nearby reported any lightning strikes or falling trees.
Wade responded, rubbing the back of his head and flipping his page over to his proper notes.
Phil was fading in and out of consciousness by the time I arrived with the ambulance, so I didn't get a witness statement yet.
So what do we have to go off of?
Driver negligence.
Wade shrugged, scratching his head with his pen as he gestured towards the aliens.
That's why I figured your kids would be the better bet. This doesn't look like something a human or nature could do.
Whoever did this put a lot of power behind it.
Tails commented, namesakes fluttering behind him as he pulled his Miles Electric out of his backpack.
Maybe 75 on the chess scale.
Just scale.
Both humans look at each other, confused.
It's what I used to track down Sonic.
The fox explained, aiming the device at Wade and Tom.
For example, you humans don't really register on the scale much. Sonic registers at a 99 while Knuckles is 95-99 depending.
So, it's like a power scanner from Dragon Ball.
Wade suggested, causing the kid to shrug in a whatever floats your boat way as Sonic nudged Knuckles with a cheeky look on his face at the fact that he had a higher Chow's scale.
When Sonic caused the blackout last year, he registered over 1,000 on the chess scale that he nearly broke my equipment from this side of the galaxy. I know if my helmet equipment picked it up, then someone else with far better equipment would have had a field day registering his abilities.
Tails responded, looking back at the car and lifting himself into the air to hover over the damage.
It hasn't changed much from this angle aside from maybe another 5%.
I spent much of my life in and out of various orders.
Knuckles spoke, running his paw over the metal and pulling away when he felt it warm through his gloves.
I feel as though I've seen this mark before.
Uranus.
Yes, it's common practice for bounty hunters to pit one alien against another.
Tails said, landing on the ground and examining his Miles Electric, brow furrowing.
The worst crime in the galaxy is keeping someone in a cage.
Tails turned towards the echidna.
Someone rare like Knuckles would have fetched a high price in the stakes.
Tom felt his blood run cold as Knuckles turned his face away, his hand dropping to his side as he looked at the other end of the road. Sonic winced in sympathy and reached out to place a hand on the older Alliance shoulder before he was shrugged away.
As the last of my kind, I was considered a pride fighter. Once I knew how to fight, I would escape only for them to collect me again from a different planet. They would pit me again and again against others of varying size, just to see me lose control of my power.
Yikes.
Sonic muttered, running the rejected hand through his grills.
Talk about a 90s Mel Gibson movie right there.
I'm sorry, Knuckles.
Tails' ears drooped as he tapped his fingers against his device as he came up on the other side of his older brother.
I should have let you come out with it in your own time.
A mitt came up and placed itself on his head, not for the first time, and he felt a thumb rub behind his ear.
It is not your fault, Kit. I should have been more forthright in my past.
Hey, your past is your past.
Sonic reached out again, and this time his hand wasn't nudged away.
You're safe here with us now. No bounty hunter is gonna take my brother from me.
Exactly.
Tails chimed in, reaching to take hold of the paw on his head and clasping it with his.
I'll have to go through us first. More than happy to oblige with that, boys.
The voice caused all of them to start and Knuckles to drop into a fighting stance, Tom and Wade drawing their guns even though they knew that there was probably nothing that they could do about whoever it was. Sonic and Tails shared a look behind Knuckles' back, their ears picking up footsteps as someone came from the forest. Gravel shifting under their shoes. She shifted her footing, one arm draped over the massive hammer the hand held onto, and she placed a hand on her hip, tilting her head.
Long time no see, Knucklehead.
Knuckles grunted, shifting forward so he was standing in front of Sonic and Tails even more and cracked his fists.
Amelia.
He said curtly, dreadlocks shifting with the movement of his head. The birdsong in the forest seemed to have quieted down, a pink electrical energy crackling around the new arrival matching the red flickering in and out around Knuckles. Amelia was the first one to rake. Her foot shifted and she leaped at him, bringing the gold and red hammer down over her head and slamming it into him, or so she thought. Knuckles' grip on the mullet tightened, his feet digging into the ground as he kept her aloft momentarily, then swung her to the side to crash into trees. He shook his fists out, ignoring the shouts of his brothers as he charged over like a raging bull. Tom kept his hand on his head as the air whipped up around them, him and Wade running over to Sonic and Tails, and a million questions running through his mind. But the first thing out of his mouth was,
Was she?
Don't ask me, Dad. I ain't got no idea.
Sonic said, his silence finally broken from the trance that her entrance had him in. Was she another hedgehog? He had so many questions, much like his dad did, and helplessly turned to Tails with a questioning look.
Who the heck is that?
Emilio, also known as Amy, one of the best bounty hunters in Mogul's paycheck.
Who's Mogo?
Look, we don't have time for this.
Tails snapped, shoving his Maz Electric into his backpack and rummaging around for his gun.
We need to catch up to.
He didn't get to finish his sentence, Sonic already taking hold of him by the waist and speeding off in the direction that the two of them had gone in, not listening to Tom's yelling for them to get back there, Tails tucked under his arm. It didn't take long for Sonic to follow the trail of destruction that both warriors had left, and the air around them shimmered as they entered one of the areas that Gun hadn't finished off yet. In the distance, he could see Knuckles raise his hands to brace against the hammer once again, his powers sparking dangerously, and Sonic saw, red. He dropped Tails off on a rock and zipped over, just in time to block the next swing of the hammer from hitting the Echidna.
Whoa, get out of the way.
The interloper yelled, looking confused as to who this guy thought he was. She rocked back as Sonic shifted her hammer to the other side, looking confused and glancing at the Echidna.
What is this, Knuckles?
Don't you? Wait, what?
The confusion on Sonic's face made the two Mobians burst into laughter and causing him to look between both of them as though he'd just missed the joke. Knuckles, he'd never seen him laugh like that before, not even after baseball. The Echidna was clutching his stomach, whipping his face with his other hand as he gestured towards Amelia.
I am sorry for the confusion. Sonic, please, allow me to introduce you to Remy, one of the few others I trust.
I would?
It's customary for former gladiators to greet each other with a battle.
Amy stated, her hammer disappearing into thin air with a crackle of pink lighting.
Where did Knuckles not tell you?
I'm afraid there's a lot of things I have yet to tell my brother.
Knuckles responded, leaning himself back into a straight posture as Tails finally came over, having seen the fighting stop and the hammer disappear from a distance.
Come, we must celebrate your arrival with ice cream.
Sonic buried his face in his hands.
Oh, great, there's two of them.